pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Tess Espejo. Tess is the Program Manager of Building and Life Safety Technologies for Underwriters Laboratories of Canada, Inc. With ULC standards for 17 years, Tess has managed technical committees, including the ULC technical committees on fire alarm and life safety, security and burglar alarm systems, Cannabis, ULC joint technical committees, and IEC ISO mirror committees. In August 2019, she moved to the Building and Life Safety Technologies group of ULC and now administers programs on fire and security systems. Please welcome Tess.
Thank you very much, Alana, for that nice introduction. So good afternoon, everyone on this call. And it's pretty daunting to be following David Hyde in this forum, but I will try my best to present to you some of the things that we need to unpack from what David has said and probably be able to address some of the concerns that he has raised. As Alana has said, I am connected with Underwriters Laboratories, or UL. It is a 125-year-old global enterprise. And here at UL in Canada, we just recently celebrated our 100th year anniversary. So we've been operating in Canada for 100 years as well. And we have 10 offices across Canada. We pride ourselves in being the global safety science leader, and we help companies demonstrate safety, enhance sustainability, strengthen security, deliver quality, and manage risk, and achieve regulatory compliance. In this presentation, my goal is to provide a context on why Canada has developed and published standards and legislations and guidelines, and we continue to do so to address the concerns that were brought to us, specifically concerning the safety and security of cannabis facilities and operations. So in this presentation, I will be talking about the concerns that were raised that prompted us to develop standards and guides for cannabis. And before I go, I will talk about an exciting new activity that UL Canada has been working with in partnership with the Standards Council of Canada for an international workshop on the safety, security, and sustainability of cannabis facilities and operations. So what is a standard and why do we need them? Simply put, a standard is a benchmark. It provides rules, guidelines, and characteristics of a certain product or activity, and so that everyone will be playing on the same level field. David Hyde has talked about stifling regulations, and it's very true for cannabis because it was considered a new and emerging business so many years ago. And unfortunately for regulators and government agencies across Canada, there was very little to go with in terms of addressing a very new industry. So many of the regulators erred in the side of caution and really put out very restrictive regulations, and then probably down the line they will adjust a little bit. So standards will help out the industry in that it can provide the guidelines or the benchmarks that was created by the industry participants themselves, because standards are created by industry stakeholders. Many of the participants in these panels are part of our technical committee on S4400 and many of our other standards. So that is important, that we hear industry on what their concerns are, what their challenges are. So very quickly, I would just like to raise the areas of concern that were brought to us that were very important to be addressed, even in the beginning. Because what is unique in this new and emerging industry is that it was coming from an illicit status into criminalization, and is now evolving into a legitimate burgeoning business. Due to its pioneering status, though, we are offered very little in terms of research, studies, historical experience, and best practices. Standardization is likewise very slow in the uptake, and the cannabis industry still remains severely underserved. In 2017, while cannabis legalization was in its very early stages in our parliament, AHJs, or the chief regulators in the area, so fire, building, electrical, came to us as UL Canada. They approached us to request our help to address the myriad of potential and real concerns around the facilities and operation of cannabis companies. And I have listed here some of those concerns in the area of safety, security, and sustainability. But I will not go to them in details because of time considerations. So, however, I would like to touch on some very important elements. It has been argued that a cannabis cultivation facility should be treated like any other farm or agricultural facility. The cannabis production, like any hazardous or non-hazardous location, and the retail store, like any other retail store or pharmacy. The first years of cannabis experience clearly illustrates that this is rarely the case. We have an industry that is very, very fast-paced, where there are a lot of repurposed and renovated buildings, especially in the very beginning. And then the industry was operating under a probably outdated rezoning and land classification scheme. And the industry itself utilized a lot of equipment that was adopted from other industries, because there were very few supplies of the equipment that the industry really needed for their operation. And then for safety, we know that the investors to build their business, the regulatory inspectors have expressed that every site looked different, especially in the beginning. They are unsure, the inspectors were unsure of what requirements to apply, and then buildings are renovated and repurposed into special construction designs that may not be addressed in existing codes and regulation. We've also seen emerging new industry growing in recent years and reshaping so that bigger players dominate more of the market. Consequently, the grow operations are increasing their footprint, and sometimes into hundreds of thousands of square footage. And under the current regime, majority of cannabis grow facilities are subject to the outdated National Farm Building Code of Canada, which was last published in 1995. Since the NFBC exempts farm buildings from most of the fire protection and structural requirements of the National Building Code of Canada, we find that most cannabis facilities will have minimal fire protection features. And of course, there are cannabis facilities that operate in automated fashion, where robots might do or conduct some of the activities that are usually conducted by humans. And there was a need to define what the requirements are for those solutions that may be considered alternative under the National Building Code of Canada, and define what those special and unusual construction are. So those are the areas that were brought to us in the areas of safety. And then, of course, the things that we want to talk about is about security. One of the pillars of cannabis legalization that David Hyde talked about is to contain and eventually eliminate the black market or criminal activities. Therefore, the handling of cannabis and cannabis products require security features in order to prevent the intrusion of illicit products into the legal market and the diversion of legal products into the black market. The Cannabis Act and the Cannabis Regulation emphasizes that in order for the legalization of recreational cannabis to work, the illicit market needed to be eliminated. Health Canada has emphasized the need to secure cannabis products from digression and ingression by requiring the traceability and transparency of the supply chain. But how much security is required? A robust, effective, and compliant security system starts with the determination of risk, and we know that, and the mitigating these risks through planning, design, installation, and integration of various security systems. We very seldom see security systems regulated. As a matter of fact, it is not regulated in many industries, and cannabis is at the forefront of this, in that it is now, for this industry, highly regulated by a government agency. But as David has said, there was a lot of interpretation because of this flexible approach that Health Canada has adopted. There was a need to standardize the rules, so the players in the industry will all operate from a level playing field and will follow just one guidebook. The last area of concern here pertains to sustainability of cannabis operations, and I will not talk about that in this presentation. What I want to do instead is talk about the standards and guides that we at UL have developed in recent years in order to help the regulators and the AHJ address the concerns that I have talked about in my previous slides. The main standard that we have developed is the National Standard of Canada, CAN-ULC S4400, safety of premises, buildings, and equipment utilized for the cultivation, processing, and production of cannabis. In this list, anything that you will see with the designation ANSI-CAN-UL or ANSI-CAN-ULC is a joint binational standard, which means that it is recognized national standard both in the United States and Canada, and that it was developed by a single technical committee with representation from both countries. There is also this ULC National Technical Guide on safety of cannabis oil extraction that we have recently published, and it provides a lot of practical guidelines and best practices for safe cannabis oil extraction. But I want to talk about CAN-ULC S4400, which was published in 2019. As I have said, this is the very first national standard of Canada, which means that it is a recognized document that can be referenced in codes and regulations. This standard has three important sections. The first section covers the protection and safety of buildings and facilities utilized for cannabis cultivation, production, and processing. Section 2 covers the devices and equipment that are utilized during operations, cannabis operations in those buildings. And Section 3 covers the security of the premises and the buildings of those cannabis operations. It provides minimum requirements for the security of premises, from intrusion and infiltration, as well as consideration for secure access and safe egress. That is the one that most of you will be most interested in that it provides the minimum criteria for the installation, maintenance, and testing of physical and electronic premises security systems, which are designed to prevent and detect intrusion into the protected premises. So it provides requirements for the physical barriers, electronic intrusion detection and alarm systems, the visibility and security monitoring of the premises, access controls, and video surveillance systems. And as I said, this standard was published more than a year ago now in 2019. But after Cannabis 2.0 has come out and came into effect, there was a need to evaluate the standard again and determine where the gaps are. So we reconvened the technical committee on that was in charge of 4400 and focused specifically on the security portions. And as David has said, there were concerns that were raised on security of cannabis premises because that was not in the scope of the initial standard, and yet there were many grow operations that are now being done outside or outdoors. So there was a need for to figure out what are the requirements for perimeter security, emergency power supplies, and the minimum requirements for the other security systems that we talked about. And then warehouse and retail and transportation and logistics. So many of, there are a few members of the panels that are going to talk later are part of this subcommittee 3, which are who are developing the requirements for this portion of the standard. And there is a need to evaluate those requirements in view of the challenges of the cannabis industry, especially what David has touched on in his presentation. Talking about the S4400 will lead me to just talk to you very quickly, because I don't have much time anymore, about the international workshop on safety, security, and sustainability of cannabis facilities in operation. It has become very clear that the global cannabis market is opening up very rapidly. And perhaps this is the next frontier in order to, for the Canadian cannabis industry to grow. Maybe you need to go to other countries. And it has also become very clear that Canada is uniquely positioned to offer global thought leadership based on the initiatives taken to date to wrestle through the safety, security, and sustainability considerations in coordination with regulators, government, and industry stakeholders. This slide provides some background about ISO, and many of you will have heard about ISO, which is the preeminent international organization for standardization, because it provides a very important platform for all of its members, its 165 member countries, to come to the table to discuss potential requirements for the building of an infrastructure for the legal cannabis industry in many of those countries. SEC, which is the Federal Crown Corporation connected with the Ministry of Industry, Innovation and Science, is in a unique position to lead this initiative because they accredit certification organizations like UL, standards development organizations, certification and testing laboratories, and they are very interested in bringing it to the table. Those who have come to them, approached them to ask about what Canada's experience was in the legalization of the cannabis industry. Even for us in UL, we have been approached by many countries, especially in Eastern Europe, and would you believe in South Pacific, and inquiring about our cannabis standards and guidelines. So we have proposed, in partnership with SEC, an international workshop using the ISO platform for the safety, security, and sustainability of cannabis facilities and operations, intending to develop and publish 3 documents. And you will be interested in workshop document number 2, which is the technical guide for the secure handling of cannabis and cannabis products. And this workshop has now gathered a lot of interest from the ISO member countries. When we closed the registration on September 30th, which was a deadline, we have gathered about 200 participants from 20 different countries that are interested to learn about the safety, security, and sustainability experience of Canada for the cannabis industry. So I am very happy that, again, many of the cannabis experts, especially in the area of security, have joined that ISO International Workshop. We will be starting in November. Most of the meetings are going to be done virtually via Zoom. But we do plan to hold a physical meeting in May in Ottawa. Hopefully, the pandemic would have been resolved at that time. And we plan to publish the 3 documents by June 2021. The intent of these documents is for, as I said, to be published as technical guides or technical specifications, and then eventually probably as a standard through an ISO technical committee. But the intent is for these countries that are looking to legalize cannabis in their own countries to have a playbook, to see how to establish a safe, secure, and sustainable cannabis industry in their jurisdictions. So that is all the time I have left, unfortunately, but I'm sending it off to Alana. This slide will show you my contact information. And then if you have any question, and probably Alana, there might be additional questions from the audience.
Yeah, absolutely, Tess. Thank you so much for that amazing presentation and for sharing all of your insights with us. As you can all see, if you have any follow-up questions for Tess or you'd like to get in touch, her email and her phone number are right there on the screen.